You know the scene. You've carved out time to tackle that big amorphous project.
Mm-hmm.
You sit down, open the blank screen, and almost immediately you feel that classic physiological response.
The knot in the stomach.
Exactly, the knot in the stomach, a tightening in the chest. That feeling is challenging enough, but then the real trouble starts.
Right. That's when the internal jury assembles.
Yes, and that critical voice pipes up and says, why can't you just focus? Why can't you get this done like any other capable, functioning adult on the planet?
And in that moment, the entire nature of the crisis just shifts. I mean, we've been diving into this material, and the whole mission here is to figure out how we stop fighting the signal and actually start decoding it.
Because the original problem wasn't a character flaw.
No, not at all. The original issue was a behavioral challenge, procrastination, or maybe a fear of starting. It was a temporary hurdle.
But the judgment.
But the judgment escalates it instantly. You are no longer just dealing with a difficult task. Now you are stuck and, crucially, disgusted with yourself for being stuck.
You've turned a problem with what you're doing
into a commentary on who you are.
And that shift from a temporary state to, like, a fixed identity flaw is the most critical hurdle to overcome.
It has to be.
Because now you're fighting two simultaneous and completely draining battles. You still have the actual work that needs to be done sitting there demanding attention.
But at the same time, you're waging this internal war against your own self-judgment about struggling with that work.
It's an exhausting lose-lose arrangement. It feels like it's designed to maximize suffering.
It's the definition of the emotional spiral. And what's so striking is how quickly this happens. We experience that initial emotion, nervousness, frustration, doubt, and the immediate, almost involuntary reaction is a question of, well, moral fitness.
Should I be feeling this?
Exactly. Should I be feeling this? We hold ourselves up against this imagined perfect standard of productivity or emotional competency.
Believing that, a truly confident or capable person would never experience this kind of doubt?
That mythical version of ourselves is the ghost we're constantly chasing. We create this flawless image, the person who starts tasks effortlessly, who feels zero doubt.
And when reality, the knot in the stomach, shows up, we immediately conclude that we are failing.
Yeah.
But here's the paradox. That intense self-judgment, that comparison, it doesn't actually neutralize the original emotion, does it?
Far from it. That judgment adds a second, highly destructive layer right on top of the original feeling.
So you start anxious.
And then you add a thick layer of shame about being anxious. You start frustrated with the task, and then you layer on self-contempt for being frustrated about something you feel you should handle easily.
That compounding effect is why these emotional states become so much harder to work with.
It's like trying to navigate a dense fog while simultaneously arguing with yourself about why you're in the fog in the first place.
And it's not just difficult to manage. The judgment itself creates this truly debilitating closed loop. If you've already decided by asking, should I feel this?
Yeah.
That the feeling is fundamentally wrong, you instantly block yourself from investigating why you feel it.
All your energy goes into suppressing the symptom, not understanding the cause.
Exactly. The emotion stops being a piece of valuable, time-sensitive information.
Yeah, it's no longer data.
It becomes damning evidence of a personal failure, a fundamental flaw in your character. And you can't meaningfully change evidence of failure.
What can you do?
All you can do is try to hide it, ignore it, or suppress it, which only guarantees the feeling will come back, probably stronger, later on.
So the knowledge we've gathered here suggests the solution requires a pretty fundamental shift in identity. It's about moving from what we might call the judge to the scientist.
That identity pivot is the core realization. When you relate to your feelings as the judge, you identify as your emotions.
You say, I'm an anxious person.
Precisely. I am an anxious person. Or, I am a procrastinator. This frames the state as a fixed trait, a personality defect you just carry around everywhere.
And if anxiety is a fixed trait, then any attempt to overcome it or change it feels like a form of self-betrayal because you're trying to eliminate a core part of who you believe you are. You're just stuck managing a personality defect for life.
That is a massive psychological burden. If you believe your anxiety is who you are, then trying to, say, structure a meeting to reduce it feels dishonest.
Like you're cheating your own nature. It's a self-limiting prophecy that prevents any real growth.
But the scientist is different.
The scientist operates under an entirely different contract with reality. The scientist identifies as someone experiencing emotions.
So the language changes completely.
It's everything. It goes from I'm an anxious person to I'm experiencing anxiety right now. This simple shift is profound. It's a description of a temporary, measurable state, a data point, not a verdict.
The emotion becomes data you can analyze, not a destiny you have to just accept.
Right. And this is where the path just diverges completely in the questions we allow ourselves to ask.
The judge and the scientist, they approach struggle with totally different assumptions.
They do. The judge asks that existential question, why am I like this? What is wrong with me?
And that question assumes there is an inherent defect that needs fixing. It leads straight to shame.
The investigation is over the moment the question is asked because it has already reached a verdict. You're broken.
But the scientist, they operate under the assumption that the emotion must have a logical reason, that the nervous system isn't random or, broken.
So the scientist asks the functional question. What is this responding to? What triggered this specific signal?
One path leads to self-blame. The other leads directly to, well, functional understanding and maybe even a strategy.
And that understanding demands empirical evidence, just like any good scientist. You need to collect information and start noticing patterns before you draw these sweeping conclusions about your character.
Right.
When you treat your emotional response as a signal, you realize the nervous system is highly specific. The emotion is not random, and it's certainly not broken. It's a precise alarm.
And this is where we really need to slow down and look at the specifics, because once you adopt that scientist's mindset, the patterns become incredibly revealing.
They really do.
It's rarely, I have generalized anxiety always. It's often much more targeted than that. For instance, you see anxiety spiking specifically before, say, unstructured meetings.
Right, but it's completely absent before meetings where the agenda is clear, roles are defined, and the expected outcomes are known.
So what is the nervous system actually communicating in that scenario?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily signaling a fear of people.
No, it's signaling a fear of ambiguity and a lack of control. The anxiety is a useful flag saying, warning, the input criteria for success are missing here.
And this situation is going to demand excessive mental energy just to manage the unknown variables.
Exactly. The emotional signal is functional. It's protecting you from the cognitive overload of an inefficient process.
Well, what about the classic example of procrastination? We assume we're just lazy or we lack willpower. But if you start acting as the scientist, you often discover that procrastination only happens on projects with vague success criteria.
Right. If the project is code-defined feature with clear metrics, you dive right in.
But if the project is develop a disruptive strategy for Q3,
Instant resistance. The underlying signal in that procrastination is often fear of wasted effort or fear of misaligned goals.
so the nervous system throws up the procrastination barrier as a defense mechanism. It's signaling, do not invest energy here until you know the target.
You could be building the wrong thing entirely. The feeling isn't laziness. It's a very specific, very rational objection to ambiguity.
Or the frustration pattern. You see frustration appearing consistently in conversations where you feel unheard or dismissed.
But it's totally absent when you're engaging with someone who genuinely makes you feel understood. The feeling isn't about the topic.
It's about the safety of the dynamic.
Yes. The emotion of frustration is acting as a boundary detector. It's signaling that the current interaction is eroding your sense of psychological safety or respect.
So once you identify that, you don't fight the frustration.
No, you address the need for a better conversational structure or a different boundary. The minute you shift from fighting the emotion, the anxiety, the procrastination, to identifying the precise situational trigger, you can address the actual source.
Now, this is where we need to challenge a lot of sort of modern self-help culture. Because the sources make a critical distinction about the limits of just plain self-awareness.
The awareness trap.
The awareness trap.
Yeah.
You could be entirely aware of your anxiety, aware of your procrastination, and still be completely miserable and stuck.
That is it. Awareness, without the active investigative curiosity that follows, is just monitoring the problem. You become a passive spectator to your own suffering.
You can deliver a perfect diagnosis of your own emotional state, but you have no mechanism to change the underlying dynamic.
You know exactly how bad you feel, but you haven't taken the critical step to change the mechanism creating that feeling.
And I think this is why some widely accepted emotional regulation advice often falls short. We're constantly told to name the feeling, acknowledge it, and accept it.
And identification is useful as a first step. It's certainly better than suppression.
But acceptance without curiosity is just a sophisticated form of resignation.
Yes. If you accept that you avoid conflict or accept that you procrastinate, and then you just stop there, Nothing changes. You've simply accepted the pattern as your immutable fate.
True acceptance doesn't mean resignation.
It means accepting the feeling is present so that you can investigate it.
So if awareness and initial acceptance are the foundation, the critical next step is what the scientist does naturally.
Run an experiment.
Run an experiment. The scientist asks, what happens if I try something different? We have to reframe this not as a high-stakes self-improvement project where failure equals personal deficiency.
But as a low-stakes experiment where the primary goal is guaranteed learning, it completely reframes the concept of failure.
How?
If you try to structure that vague meeting, that's the input and the anxiety, the result only slightly changes, you haven't failed.
Right.
You've successfully collected data showing that meeting structure alone isn't the only variable. So you refine the hypothesis and maybe you try focusing on role clarity next time.
Every outcome provides valuable data that guides the next attempt.
You're just testing whether a different approach produces different results.
And this objective approach, it just drains the shame out of the process because the scientist never judges their data, only the validity of their method.
Exactly.
Let's synthesize this practical difference for everyone listening, maybe side by side, so the distinction is crystal clear in the heat of the moment.
Okay. Think about the moment you feel stuck. The judge asks, "What's wrong with me for feeling this?" The question is focused entirely on a diagnosis of deficiency.
Whereas the scientist asks, what specific circumstance, context, or demand is this feeling responding to? The focus is entirely on the external situation.
And when you're facing the task, the judge's core thought is, I need to stop being anxious and just use willpower to get over this.
The scientist thinks, I am currently experiencing anxiety. That means a variable is present that signals threat or ambiguity. What exactly triggered this feeling right now?
And the resulting action is completely different. The judge concludes, this means I'm clearly not ready for this task, so I'll wait until I feel inspired.
The investigation terminates, the task stalls.
The scientist investigates. The anxiety is tied to the vague success criteria. What is the smallest action I can take right now to define one clear metric that would make this feel more manageable?
So the core difference is the fundamental assumption you make about the emotion itself. The judge assumes emotions must be aggressively controlled or eliminated.
Which leads to suppression, resistance, and burnout.
Conversely, the scientist assumes emotions are inherently valuable, rational signals that are worth decoding.
And that framework leads directly to understanding the underlying demand and applying effective behavioral change to the environment, not just your internal state.
Which brings us right back to the central obstacle we identified at the very beginning. The wall of shame. You absolutely cannot regulate or effectively change an emotion you are ashamed of having.
Shame is the definitive shutdown mechanism. It immediately closes off objective investigation. The minute you decide the feeling proves there is something fundamentally wrong with you, you lose all ability to explore it objectively.
It becomes fixed, irrefutable evidence of a personal deficiency.
Instead of fluid, changeable data about your current situation.
So the critical shift, the entire point of moving toward the scientist mindset, is stopping that identity-defending question, should I feel this?
And immediately starting the data collecting question. What is this responding to? What does this feeling require me to understand about my environment?
Your emotions are not an indictment of your character.
They are merely signals, often highly accurate signals, about what your nervous system is reacting to. Scientists study signals, judges argue with them.
So the ultimate takeaway for you, listening, is that the difference between feeling completely stuck and effectively moving forward is never about what you initially feel. That knot in your stomach is just the starting bell.
It's always about what you choose to do next.
Always what you do next with that feeling.
So think about this as you apply this mindset to your daily life. How many of your most recurring frustrations, professional or personal, could be instantly solved not by summoning more willpower, but simply by applying objective scientific curiosity to investigate and decode those hidden triggers?
That shift from judgment to investigation.
That is where the real sustainable power lies.